Yeah.
Maybe there was some astrology last week that I think must have stirred something too, or his hormones. I don't really know, but yeah. But you're right. Maybe that suggestion is what's doing it.
Oh.
It's all your fault, Christina, or thank you, Christina. One of the
It's the planets. It's not me.
I did a thing today on paying attention to what we pay attention to, or this week on attention of attention. That's really been really interesting. And it's interesting that you bring up paying attention to our senses. That book, The Spell of the Sensuous by David Abram, I think I brought that up earlier. I can't remember. It's one of my favorites in terms of just really thinking about the value of our senses. And I want to just dive into the prompt this week because it could go in any number of ways. And it already is really interesting to think about the connection with subconscious and like hypnotherapy and connection with other people. When I'm thinking, so just big picture, and then we'll kind of dive in. When I was doing a bunch of research on courses in the good life and the philosophy of the good life, what comes up as being like, what do people say the good life is? There's a lot of people have written a ton on this, right? And the themes that I came up with that I felt like would be easiest to like structure a course around was around purpose. So why are we here? What are we doing here? A good life is a sense of purpose. A sense of projects or processes. What are we doing? Like a sense of active engagement in something. And then the third one is people. That part of the good life is our connection with people. And so this could be intimate or otherwise, radically collaborative groups or intimate one-on-ones. Excellent. But honestly, the real big question this week, the theme of this week is connection. And so if you think about everything in this course is kind of meant to be like a menu. It's almost like a survey introduction course of all these different inroads into what we call the good life for us. So starting with, you know, a good answer is actually just being radically present and being super aware of our experience. Having a clear sense, and that's week one, having a clear sense of purpose, like a clear why and a meaning and something that impels us forward. That's super powerful. That's week number 2. Going out and exploring in the world, finding paths that make sense to us, paying attention to different things. That's week number 3. Working on the idea of like designing, of iterating, of trying shit out, of having random conversations, of like being forward and learning and reframing our mindsets and all of that. That's week number 4. The biggest thing that we're missing, to draw from an earlier week of this class, is who do we want to take roller skating? How much do people play a role in our sense of the good life? According to studies, a pretty big part. They're also a pain in the ass. And in a previous course, when I led this section, you know, I went in all starry-eyed on connection and how powerful connection is, this idea of connection. And it came up that, you know, it can be actually kind of dangerous also to be connected, and that there is some, you know, our connections might derail us from, you know, what we're going for or what. Anyway, I want to kind of spend a little bit of time writing on a couple of different things. But one is, I get asked, like, when I say connection, I'm like, what are your most powerful sources? On this idea of, after reading the power path, what are your most powerful sources of connection? Another way of asking this in terms of humans are, who are your biggest heroes? Who do you draw inspiration from? This is kind of where we're going to turn the corner in this course. And honestly, when I was playing with different structures of how this course would be, this was another place that I was thinking about starting the course, like the hero's journey, where we're called to adventure, and then we figure out who's our mentors, who are we going to talk to, who are we going to draw inspiration from. They could be alive or dead. You might draw inspiration from Jesus, or Buddha, or I don't know, Martin Luther King, or I don't know. Okay, so does that make sense? What are your most powerful sources of connection? Who are your biggest heroes? You don't need to answer both of those, but it is also, we kind of are at a good point to just kind of recircle about the good life to us. One of the prompts this week is to just kind of get regrounded in what we see the good life as, and how much or how little people play a part in that. So we're going to kind of, for the next 2 weeks, kind of take the design framework and move it into, how does that play with people? How can we get more playful with people in a good way? It's funny, there's like play signals. So I did finish reading the book on play, and he talks about how the animal kingdom, there's all kinds of play signals. And people do this too. Like if you're in a social setting and you're like, so how about this weather? That's like a bid, like, you want to play? People can be like, yeah, don't talk to me. Or they can be like, it sure is different. And now you're quote unquote playing, right? So that's kind of what is on tap for this week. And I do think it's a big enough one that it's worth writing on. So is that cool? Any questions? Ready to dive into the process of patient presence? All right. Thanks for being here. This is a great group. I'm going to mute myself. Let's go for about 13 minutes and see how that goes. So just till about 12:25. What are our biggest sources of connection? And do we have any heroes that are coming to mind? Inspirational people that help us? Cool. Okay. That went a lot of different places for me. So I'm curious, kind of tying into where we are, if there's anything, synchronicities or otherwise, sharing from this week that seems relevant. I would love to hear it.
Okay, I'll start.
Thanks, Samantha.
That went a lot of different places for me as well. I think probably towards the end, I got to the point where I was actually thinking about whether I'm a powerful connection and a powerful source of inspiration to myself.
Yes.
And I think the last line that I wrote was just like, well, people play a role in my script where I can't always play the role of me. And it's just one of those things where I've been thinking about, we do need that connection, but sometimes if you are looking outwards for connection, for inspiration, for joy, if that outside force is not there, am I still content with just being me? So that's where the writing took me. Yeah, definitely went to where I was not expecting it. So.
Exactly where I started. It's interesting. And I asked, what's the most powerful source of connection that I have? I got to myself.
Same. That's
really?
so weird. Yes. I'm thinking, like, where's the hero? I'm like, not here, this.
We are waiting for something that has already found us, as Jim Morrison said.
Yeah.
So, Christina.
Well, you can't connect without yourself. Like
Right.
it's for me, I got to a place of connection is being with or in common with. And that can be an animal or a tree or a piece of music or a poem or whatever. But I mean, you can admire something from afar, but connection, you have to interact with it and you have to have something in common with it. I have to have something in common with it. So there's no connection without yourself, right?
Which, I mean, really brings up the really, Whitman saying, I contain multitudes. And this question of like, who am I and who is, because if I say my biggest connection is with myself, is there a different higher aspect of myself that I'm connecting to that is less confused than the day-to-day dopey-do Sean? Or is it all like one thing? And maybe I don't know. I don't want to get too far afield on this, but that's kind of what I like. There's a source, like the still small voice of wisdom that is like, there's a part of me that is really not really bothered by things that other parts of me are very bothered by, and not for the better.
That sounds interesting.
My writing went to like talking about what makes me feel connected. And it's really like the very first thing I wrote was safety, like safety of in many forms, like safety to be vulnerable, safety to feel like you can share. I also wrote some about like common interest, of course. I said, if we're going to do it right, we need to be inspired and real and messy and grounded. Like there's a piece for me that connection happens when people are wholly authentic, right? And sometimes that's gross, but it's
messy.
awesome in its grossness. Yeah, it can be messy. And then when you think about this is sort of in that weird brain space of, I'm often inspired by the collective belief that we all are in this thing, this whatever it is. And so for me, that belief that we're connected as a greater collective people is an inspiring headspace for me.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like the feeling safe with connection versus the playfulness and vulnerability of connection. Can it be both for you?
I think for sure. It's interesting, right? That safety was one of the first things that comes up. It makes me wonder, like, why do you feel like you have to be that way? And it's probably because I'm seeking right now in my life, probably deeper connections. Cause I really feel like I could talk with anyone, feel connected with anyone. I'm sure I could find a common thing to have a discussion about. So I'd feel never short on the, like, I could connect with you about this subject or this topic or this, political thing or whatever. That's never really a challenge for me. I think the sort of connection that I'm seeking right now, or the one that made me say safety, is the one that feels deeper, the one that feels long-standing, the one that feels maybe needed in my life. Who knows? I don't know where that came from.
So it's human connection, Jeannie. It's like human connection that you wrote about. Was there other things
Right.
that aren't human that you wrote about?
Nope, that was simple.
And I mean, I think I really want to, your question's really good, that can there be a space of danger, uncertainty, risk, and still also safety and vulnerability, like inside of that, right? And I joked, like, yes, that's like the whole idea of a safe word. If you're like, of being like, this is too much, I'm tapping out. But I know if we engage in this process, that I'm just using this metaphorically, if we engage in this process, there's going to be a time where I can be like, nope, that's it. And there's still like a container of safety to play inside of, which is really interesting considering this personal development growth and with another person. Like, hey, or like starting a business. Hey, I'd actually really like to launch this product. What's that look like? Like, how can we do this in a way that's going to be conducive to our growth and conducive to who we authentically are, while also playing and you know what I mean? Like, there is a certain, so I do think that's really important here. That tension between safety and risk, or I don't know. There's another aspect to this.
Christine, I guess to answer it, I wasn't just talking human connection, although most of that is what I was thinking about, but some of that is like the spiritual connection of the human energy, maybe, or the collective energy of, you and I feel the same about this, like the power of nature, right? The connection of that spiritual realm too. But most of this writing for me was focused on people. Just clarity there for you.
Well, it's interesting because for me to feel connected, I feel like it becomes part of me, whether it's something that a person said or a person themselves, or a song or a poem or a tree. And there's like an element of magic and playfulness, but it's not just human, but maybe it is because we're the ones experiencing it.
And just that point is really interesting in the sense of friendship, the real deep friendship, the long lasting friendship. You are making an investment in the well-being of another person, in that they do like become part of your story, you become part of their story. So their trials you experience as trials, their tribulations you experience as tribulations, their successes, their joys you experience as joys as well. So there is like this and interestingly, in Buddhism, the 4 immeasurable states, like the highest states we can be in, one of them is compassion, so being with the suffering of another person, and the other one is sympathetic joy, so being with the joy of another person. And like when we're really actually drawing or being with another person in their pain and trials, having compassion for them, and when we're experiencing their joy as our own, is like high level, right up there with loving kindness and equanimity as being
I'm glad
like
you brought that up.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
I was feeling like, wow, I went a totally different direction, because I was thinking more about, not realizing, but now that I read back and listen to others, I think a lot of times when I think about connection, it's almost when either I'm connecting others or supporting them, or just what you were talking about, being in the state of being happy for others, enjoying their joy. One of the things as a pretty serious introvert, but one thing I love to do is get a group of people together and watch them play and have a good time. And Jeannie knows that for sure. I love to see people laugh and find joy. And I also love to see people cry and be emotional. I love those states of emotion for people. And that's when I feel really connected. But I'm kind of one of those people that I don't know why, but I'm super comfortable with vulnerability. And so people come to me a lot. And I have to be really careful about that support role and developing, others, because I have to know when to say no, when to engage, when to observe, and then to really pay attention to how that's making me feel, because it can be super duper exhausting. But that's kind of where I went. When I think about the strengths that I see in myself, one of them is developer, and I think I get great joy and connection from that. So I don't know, I went a totally different direction, but that's where I needed to go. That's where the pen told me.
Mine was really similar to what Jeannie said. I started with I feel most connected when, and it was when I'm gathered in celebration or in service with others is kind of the direction I went. So whether it be school or work or just kind of connecting on things that we have in common, it's one of my favorite things. And kind of being a what is the word? Not a conductor, but a catalyst for connection. And then it was interesting that you were talking about safety, and I also wrote about the opposite of connection, which is separation and kind of the illusion thereof, which it's not really a real thing, I don't think. And so I kind of wrote about what if connection is like a woven basket that kind of holds us all safely within it, where we can be safe and vulnerable. And then I thought of the illusion of each strand being a separate thing when really it's a full basket. So you could take the perspective where, oh, we're each a little strand woven in this basket, or you could just see it as a basket. And then in that way, we are all one. So I thought that was interesting that we were talking about safety and could we just be held in this little connected basket and feel whole together. So yeah, that's kind of where I went with it.
This just made me think of, how we've written the most powerful connections. How about it was a case of the most powerful connected? Because you can have a connection that you lose, but you're still connected in some way. So it seems like when you're connected, you're more in the present, you're more in the now, and you build a connection with somebody who's connected to you. And it's okay to lose them, but the connection doesn't die.
It's attached or with, right? That's what connected is. And the connection can be in the past. Like if you think of time and connection in that relationship.
I think of it kind of as a part of. And so if you become a part of, it's hard to never be a part of, those connections might last to eternity, whatever eternity is. But that was, yeah. Anyway, that when you become a part of something, and whether it's as strong as it was yesterday, today, or not, it doesn't feel that way at all tomorrow, but that true connection is like a part of.
So I wrote immediately what came to mind are the professional contacts that I've had in my life, because they have always been the most consistent and guaranteed, as I've lived in three different, I've lived in Europe in 2 different countries, in New York City and in Fort Collins, and now I'm down here in Denver. they've been, they've been the most consistent people in my life. As when you're away from your family, you don't always have that, ready connection, and relationships and friendships take time, right? And so when you're moving every 4 or 5 or 6 years, that takes time to establish those personal relationships. So that's where I started, but then I immediately went to, I wish I could find a more powerful source of connection with myself instead of always looking externally. Aha. But then I, kind of continued to list the different types of people that inspire me. So music and people who perform music, especially singers, inspire me. People who are able to be vulnerable, people who seem to be happy with lots of positive energy, and strangers is kind of where I ended that list. I love connecting with strangers, even if you'll never see them again. The feelings of happiness and elation, at least that I experienced, are always noteworthy and palpable. That was one of the hardest things about COVID for me, is I just didn't get that daily dose of human connection at the grocery store, at the coffee shop, or wherever else. But then, I wrote this, thinking about that, that common connection, just simply by saying hello to someone and being friendly to someone at the park. I wrote, we need more meaningful and collective inspiration to connect us in this world. So that immediately then, points to what it is that I do professionally, and what it is that I'm moving myself towards, because we know, from a scientific perspective, we know that when connection and belonging, what we call connectedness and belongingness, lead to better outcomes for all of us, right? They lead to better societal outcomes, whether they're health or economic or social, or they just do. So just how important it is that we are connected, to whatever it is. And I'll just go back to the comment: we need more meaningful and inspired connectedness in our world. We're too scattered. There's too many things to focus on. we don't have enough time to truly just dive in and connect as much as we should.
Well, and so much of our attention is given to social media platforms that give us the feeling of being connected, but actually are difficult to maintain over time, right? Like post-scrolling session, we don't feel connected. We feel like, even though those platforms promise us a sense of connection and it feels like we're getting connected, very different than setting up a time to meet with a group of people long-term and getting to know them in that way.
So what would be, because just thinking about what Kyle said, is you can be connected. Can you be connected without having a connection? As in, is the connection the active relationship? It's not something passive, something that you have to work on, but you can still be connected to somebody, but there's no connection. And I think that's I was just thinking about social media and how many followers or people you have on LinkedIn. Somebody's asking you to connect doesn't mean you're going to build a connection.
Samantha, I wonder how much of that also does that drain us? Having all of these superficial, what we call connections, right? These being connected in a superficial way to multiple people. At one point I thought, should I just delete most people from my Facebook? Because even though I hid them so it doesn't show up on my feed, is that still pulling? Right? Is there something there that's diluting everything else for me? I don't know.
Samantha,
Fear of letting go.
Yeah. But that almost reminds me of like a plant, like how you have to deadhead the ones that are done, because otherwise the plant is trying to give them energy. So like, do we need to like deadhead our plant so that we can actually grow in the right direction that we want to? Something like that. That's interesting. And another thought I just had was, can we recognize maybe the connection with people that we haven't met yet? And maybe that's why we've drawn them into our reality, or like, were we connected to that stranger before we even met? And is that why they're in your reality? Which is,
it feels like that sometimes, right?
Right, totally.
Yeah.
Is it a fear of letting go? Because when you mentioned the Facebook thing, I deactivated my Facebook. I remember there used to be a race to who would have the most like friends on Facebook. Somebody got 1,000 friends. Like, oh my gosh, like this is in 2007. Someone had 1,000 friends on Facebook. That was a lot. And then on Instagram, I literally just was very intentional about who was following me and who followed and who I followed, because it's like, it was really people I had a connection with. I don't have to have somebody who I met in nursery school trying to connect with me now. We're connected, but there's no connection whatsoever. So why should I share or have some energy of my life go to you if we aren't even on that same place and don't have that relationship? How much dead weight do we have, not just of people, but even just of ourselves, still holding on to old versions of people when that was an old version of ourselves?
Yeah. All great points. And then the business brain comes on and says, wait a minute, I need to stay connected to all these people, because when I'm starting something new, I want to tell them all, and they all have connections to connections to connections. So it's that mix, right? Like there's not a total separation of personal and work. It's all connected.
It's so connected.
Yes. Okay. So obviously it's so interesting if everything is connected or interconnected, and this conversation could take any number of angles. And there is the idea of like commodified connections. So the first time someone's brought up connections on LinkedIn, where you can connect with someone, and what that means as a potential business lead and opportunity, versus someone, and this is the distinction that I really want to make. It's a good time to do this. When we see someone, or when we connect with someone that we want to spend time with, or that we appreciate, or that we actually like connect with in like the long term, or at least, and I actually think it can be with strangers as well, where it illuminates something about ourselves in some kind of a way. Like we become more fully alive in the presence of this person, or we're really interested in them as a way that it basically, this is a powerful, powerful way to get more in touch with who we are. Like if self-knowledge and understanding where I am and where I'm going is really valuable, right? And part of which came up in my page, is being authentically who I am. Those connections of other people, I'm like, wow, that really, like, something about that is really interesting, because it's showing me something about me. It's like this connection is helping me, and I hope that this connection is also helping other people in ways that I don't know.
I think that's really interesting, Sean. I was thinking about maybe why I love to stay connected with people from my past. And I wonder, I don't know if there's anyone else here, but I grew up moving every 2 years. So I don't have a set of friends from this grade. You know what I mean? Like there were never super long-term connections until I was much older. But I am that person who, when I was in New Orleans, drove back across the lake to see my best friend from 7th grade, who I had not seen since high school. You know, I mean, I love to have those long-term, and there's not a ton of them, but maybe more than a lot of people, I don't know. And I think it's about reminding me who I was and where I came from. I just feel like, you know, there's a really good book that I read about being a class straddler. Like if you've moved your social financial class in your lifetime, like if you've changed, that you're still so connected to that, your class of origin, not your class currently. And I think like my whole life feels that way. Like I like to be reminded of when I was a little redneck in my boat on the bayou in Louisiana. You know, I really like, I love that. I don't know, it's interesting. There's just some of those connections to I guess I always believe our past so informs our future that I do stay really connected with quite a few people, I think. And I see my mom doing the same thing, which I'd never really thought about until today, but super comfortable just reaching out to someone and going, hey, I'm going to be in town. I know I haven't seen you in 20 years. Want to catch up?
I don't want to see most of those people.
That's so sad.
I mean, I think
maybe it's good for you, but for me,
yeah. But I was going to say, I think that's a wonderful thing. But I think all of our experiences are probably different in that way. And so for me, it's actually the letting go of a lot of that is the healthy thing for me to do. So.
I've let go a lot of people too. I mean, like I say, it's not a ton. It's just, it's interesting to think like how connections nourish us and how
There we
they
go.
don't. And so that's what I think I've been really thinking about, is those connections that really nourish us, and just the ones that are just background noise and you really should just be either silencing them or delete.
Boom.
It's
So
relationship, right?
yes.
It's being in, it's active, it's in relationship, and it can be as shallow or as deep as you want it to be, but that's relationship, and it takes us. And like connections are spontaneous relationships, right? And they can be with trees or an animal or a place, in relationship to place. Like I wouldn't be in this group without those connections, without those relationships, Jeannie and Sean.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Like, yeah, like that's connection, it's relationships.
I was going to say, Leslie, I actually have like the opposite problem because I'm locally grown, born and raised in Fort Collins. So sometimes I feel like I'm overly connected to my past lives, which makes it a little bit hard to change and grow and be and identify with maybe a different, newer version of me. Because I walk through town and people have their elementary version of me that they expect me to stick with, and different jobs. So I almost have that problem in the opposite way, where it makes it hard to grow and change.
Yeah, I think I see that being more common than I mean, I'm almost like a military kid, but my dad wasn't in the military, but it was the same type of job model. You know what I mean? We're never anywhere more than a couple of years.
It's interesting, Candace, that you say that. So for whatever reason, I was prompted to look back. I don't know if we're supposed to do this, but I do it all the time. From the original version of this topic from the first time I took this class. And I wrote, and this is, I feel this way about this, like, how are we to acquire more connections who move us, I wrote this last time, move us into the space and mindset that we want to be in now, right? How do we, like, what's the method? How do you, and then it reminded me of some Clubhouse moment that I feel like was happening about talking about friends and how we get friends as adults and how does that work? And I don't know. Yeah, well, go ahead, Sean.
No, that is exactly the question that I wanted to reframe. And was we have two different experiences now on the table about how there's old connections that nourish us and remind us who we were, that we want to hold on to, that brings us strength. So the key word is nourishment. There's one way of looking at these old connections that actually, when we bring them back up to the surface, it nourishes, reminds us of a part of who we were that we don't want to lose, that gives us strength and nourishes us. Then there's this other experience of these past people that project their images of us onto us that have no business being on us because they don't know us anymore. And it's like a big, like, fuck you, actually. I'm not the person you think I am. Please remove your gaze from me. And I don't know a nicer way to say this than, well, gotta go, you know? Oh God, that was awkward. That was right, which is not nourishing. So then, Jeannie, it's your question. I wanted to, moving forward, how do we cultivate the kinds of connections that nourish us and deadhead or snip the connections that don't? The kinds of connections, and Samantha, I freaking love that quote. It's come up enough. How do we generate and nourish connections with other people that allow us to become versions of ourselves that we aren't yet to be, that allow us to shed? And I think this is a really big, like, honestly, this may be the most important question of the course. Because I do think we exist in connection with other people. And a lot of it, Kyle, to your point, is at work. But I don't want to say anything else. I just want to keep this question really alive for us and put it in the notes or whatever. What things can we do? How do we continue to nourish the kinds of connections that are going to help nourish us? Exactly your question, Jeannie. Sorry, that was my question.
I like what Samantha asked there, like, how do I know and accept the difference between, you know, who's, in my brain, I was interpreting that as who's here for a little bit and who's here for a longer term. And I think in trying to create new connections, for me, what I've been attempting to do, because I feel like it's healthier for me, is to not put on that potential connection if I think this is going to be my bestie versus this is going to be somebody who's in my life for 3 weeks. And to be open to what it is now and that it will unfold if it's meant to be for longer.
I think they say people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, right? That's the saying.
Yeah.
And this is crazy too. I was just thinking, Sean, when you talked about like nourishment and nutrition, and I was talking to a friend about how, isn't it weird that they call it a news feed? And it's like, what are we actually feeding? What are our connections really feeding us? And does it have any nutrition? Or is it just like feeding yourself all of these friends' information and you're like, are they even friends? I don't know. It's like focusing on that nutrition and what are we being fed? I just love that nourishment and nutrition and what are my connections actually feeding me? And is it toxic? Is it nutritional? So I love that. I think that's really cool.
And on the flip side, we say like to be really nutritive of other people. So I talked to my friend on the phone. I'm like, I'm aiming to be as nutritive as possible in this relationship. So if this isn't helping, just like hang up at any time, please. And we laugh about that. It's like, okay, cool, me too. If I'm not feeding you, like, just okay. So we both are trying to feed each other in an interesting way.
Does that not need an audit of who we are? Because how about if we're the dead weight in some of our friendships?
It's that whole concept for me of like uber presence. I was just thinking about this for Suzanne, like the only way you can know if that connection is going to be here today, tomorrow, you don't. Like if you're uber present for the experience you're having right now, you're just like, you're in it and you're taking it at face value as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we afraid that if we let go of certain connections because we're doing this sort of audit of our lives, are we afraid that somebody who we thought we were connected to will do the same of us and technically get rid of us? So is that why we fear letting go of that Facebook friend who you added in 2014, have never talked to, but you don't want to be the one to sever the tie? Because how about if they don't say, why did you cut me off? How about if they just accept it?
Sure. I also don't want to be a dick too. So like, I don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings. Right. So yeah, but that's an excellent point.
Is it being a dick, or is it the fear of somebody not needing us, even though we don't need them?
Yeah, for me, it's more of a fear of being a drag. It's just like, hey, I don't need this anymore. Like, thanks for all your fancy philosophy, but I've got to actually go eat some food now. So, it's that, like...
Yeah,
it looks like...
I've had people, so it's interesting because I've had closer people. This is not like Facebook level. I haven't talked to them in 35 years, but people who are closer, and I've had to let some of the closer people go. And in the process of doing that, it hurt me so much to do that, even though they weren't good for me. But going through that process, then when somebody did it to me, I was able to accept it because I'm like, oh, they're doing what's good for them. Like for whatever reason, they can't be around me right now or ever. And so that's not about me, it's about what they need. So that was a very difficult process, but there probably is an element of that even in the mass letting go of the Facebook friends. Sure.
Is that our selfish nature? The fact that we know that we can't have everyone in our lives, but for some reason we believe we should be in everybody else's life.
It's ego. It's ego needing to say you're good, you're perfect, you're valuable. And for me, it was because I hadn't been doing enough for that for myself.
Yes.
And so being able to let go of that ego part enabled it to I don't need the validation. If I went and I looked and my Facebook friend count was 25 people, I actually would not care at all now. Like I shut the likes off on my Instagram. I'm like, I don't care. I don't need to see it. I don't need to be reinforced in that way. And
And I mean, so much of this is so interesting that our connections, again, is raising these images about who we are, how we identify, right? So ego is, and I'm a big proponent in healthy egos, like creating an identification that feels good for us. So I am the kind of person that doesn't care about, or I'm the kind of person that's willing to let go of my person. So there is like an ego trick. I am the type of ego that lets go of the ego. Or listens to the ego, but only takes it as one voice, and also listens to my grandmother somewhere up there or whatever. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't diminish the power of the ego.
no, it's good. It's a good thing. It's the only thing that makes us do anything.
One of them.
I wonder
Right?
if
I
one
mean,
of
that's
them-
the motivation, the whole dopamine, whatever. Like that's that whole thing that makes us be able to impact other people, and we have a drive because of the ego. So it's not
Yes.
it's not all bad.
No.
I wonder too if a lot of that fear comes from that kind of scarcity concept. Like if I don't have enough friends, I won't be enough. Or I think it ties into both the scarcity issue and worthiness issues,
Yes.
which are both really messy.
Yeah.
And really important. And again, that connects with the ego. And I think how fucked up our culture is that we have these fucked up cultural ideas that I'm worthwhile if blank.
Yeah. Right. Conditions.
Conditions. So deconditioning which is why I think like doing this deep philosophical work is really vulnerable, because it does, we are like coming into contact with what really actually matters to me. And that's freaky. Especially if it means like we might have to let some shit go or be let go.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really working on right now. And this class is helping with, this workshop is helping with, is what makes me feel connected, what makes others feel connected, and how can I bring more of that to all of us? And ego is just part of it, because there's things that make us feel connected that aren't to have anything to do with how many friends we have. I mean, that's one source of connection, but we all need to feel connected in this place, in this time. I think we all need that. And some people are just so starving for connection in the world right now that it keeps me up at night. And it's not that they need me to be their friend or that they need more friends, but they need connection. And how can I help bring that? And what is that?
Christina, do you think some
Powerful.
of that is the idea that people are looking for connection to look like a certain thing, and so they're not actually seeking the things that would give them real connection?
I think they need connection in order to feel human and to feel seen and heard and
Sure.
honored as a life.
But do you think that, so I went to this authentic relating. I don't know if anybody's ever been to one of those groups where they do this authentic relating. There's different set of activities. It's like a whole movement. And I saw it like on a meetup, and I'm like, oh, I'll go. And this was before pandemic. And there were, I don't know, 25 of us in a room sitting in a circle, and we had all these different activities to do. And they really got us connected to people very quickly. One of the exercises was you would have to stand up from your seated place in the circle, stand up in the middle, and say, something that you wish you had. And I said, I wish I had, a group of people that I could go out to happy hour with more than once a month or something like that. And somebody else stood up and he was like, I wish I ever had somebody to go to happy hour with. And now I look back on it and I'm like, well, that was like, that was the thing I wanted, because that was a signal to me that I had connection, or that I had friends, and that I had meaning, and that I had worth, and that I was seen, and all of that, and I belonged, which couldn't be further from the truth now that I know that. But for him, I'm thinking just for people in general, and it was certainly for me at the time, it's these cultural signals, right? That we've checked these boxes. We have whatever, how many friends on Instagram? We have, you know, we get to go out drinking 3 nights a week, or whatever the cultural signals are that we've made it. We have connections, we have friends. And that we're all looking for those benchmarks instead of looking for the stuff that all of you have been talking about, which is that real connection, that authenticity, that the energy connection, the vulnerability, all of those kind of things that I think we all, to an extent, look for the markers instead of what's real.
This is now basically a revamp of the Ghostbusters song. Like, who are you gonna call?
Samantha, you're amazing.
Love
I
it.
was just thinking when you mentioned about Instagram followers. I mean, okay, who's got a lot of Instagram followers? I'm gonna guess. Let's say somebody like Kim Kardashian has 200 million followers. Okay, I have 100. I bet you in a time of need, you can probably still call the same number of people.
So true.
Who you gonna call to take roller skating? Kyle,
Our new
I think
theme
you've been
song.
trying to get in here.
Oh, good. This is great. So please, everyone, help finish the things that I'm going to say, but I just see a lot of connections to the various things that are coming up. And, you know, Christina, here's an example for you, and it's been part of my professional work for the last year, which has made, you know, well, I submitted my letter of resignation, by the way. It's official, it's formal.
Can we clap?
Wow. Let's take a moment to acknowledge that. I keep on wanting to ask you every time I talk to you, as it felt like it was just about to.
Yeah. I'll be with the organization for a little bit longer because there are things that, you know, I care, and there are things that I want to make sure I finish and do well on my way out. And one of them is we're kind of wrapping up our program year for the Juntos program, which if I haven't said anything on these calls, I'll just say very quickly, it's a national program that helps Latino families navigate the post-secondary training and education world. Applying for scholarships and applying to university is hard for any family. You know, throw a language barrier in there, good luck. And so we just wrapped up our very first pilot cohort in Colorado, and just in a short 5 weeks, 6 sessions, the amount of connection that I have goosebumps. The amount of connection that we were able to develop between all of those families who were feeling isolated and alone, and now they have a community, and their lives are probably going to be forever changed. And so we all have to collectively do more of that work, even if it's just, you know, going back to what I said earlier, being nicer to the people that we interact with at the grocery store. I mean, it's just so critically important for us as humans. You know, a few notes that I took from one of the keynote speakers, and a lot of this we know, but, you know, it's just always important in those moments when someone who does this work is reinforcing what we already know, that in our world and in our country, perhaps specifically, loneliness on the rise. We're increasingly insecure. Young individuals don't have the lowest levels of hope that our younger generations have ever had. People don't feel like they have anything to contribute to their neighbors' lives or their neighborhood. I mean, it's bleak. And I don't think that it's that bleak, but I do think that it's something that we need to really start paying attention to. So yeah, like, what is it that we need to do in order to increase individual sense of belongingness and connectedness? Because we know that for, you know, in a lot of different systems, our outcomes, going back to what I was saying earlier, our outcomes aren't as good as they could be because we aren't connected, because we don't have a sense of responsibility and a sense of connection to, you know, the people that are around us. So, you know, what do we do? Like, how do we get over that? I personally think we should ban social media, and I think that would do a lot to help us. But just think, you know, something that you were mentioning, Suzanne, about, you know, networking, right? And whether it's a new opportunity or you're looking for an opportunity, we think that the more people that know about it, the better. but what did we do in the 1980s or even the 1990s? You know, people still found jobs, they still networked, they still, you know, made connections. What is it that we can do, and how is it that we can simplify our lives? That's my rhetorical question, because I don't know. I mean, I'm so scattered and so, you know, maybe it's just a phase I'm going through, but I don't know that I've ever been so, good way to say it. You know, that's the human condition, right? We all have a lot of balloons that we've got floating in the air. But I feel like I have so many balloons that are so in so many different places that it is almost impossible to tie those strings together so that they can all, you know, so that they can be connected. I don't know how to simplify, but I'm going to keep working on it, keep trying.
Kyle,
Putting your
for you-
job's helpful, Kyle.
I'm sorry.
Putting your job is helpful.
Yeah, there you go.
and also
Step
this is a good inquiry. Like, how might other people help me clarify that? Like, you know, as soon as you, or can they? How much of that work of putting those balloons into something I can grip is going to be facilitated by other people? And how much of it's not going to be? Like, what resource, again, another way of thinking about this is resourcing.
Mhm.
And there's an open question here. Like, how can other people help me resource for that? One real way, and it is conversating with other people, like this kind of a container. And I didn't make this connection earlier. Having a container, a learning container, can be like with other people like that we have. And I do think that Candace's point about contribution is exactly what I wrote in my notes. I really do feel like we are really, in our culture, really hungry for opportunities to help.
Yep.
And as soon as we feel like we're actually helping other people, we feel so much better. But it's so difficult to get those opportunities. And it's I think one of the really, really alive questions for me is, how can we really provide people the opportunity to help other people, give them meaningful opportunities to really help others? Because in contributing, in helping others, I feel like we're just so hungry for that.
Yeah.
We're so hungry for that.
And can we do that in both work and play? Like, you know, how can we
Yes.
contribute
Yep.
through work and play?
Mhm.
And not to oversimplify and not to, you know, say too much, because I realized I was speaking there for quite a while. But
You're all good, man.
first, Samantha, I agree completely. Right? That kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like, you know, without, you know, we managed to survive without Facebook and LinkedIn and cell phones and whatever else. We managed to be okay without all of this stuff, like, you know, 10, 20 years ago. But, you know, I always will use kind of the example of, you know, kind of like the community, the neighborhood picnic, or kind of like that family summer gathering at the, you know, the city park underneath the shelter, right? And that's a, right, Sean? That's an example of a container. You know, you're going there with the intention of, you know, building connections, having fun, breaking bread together. But, you know, just think about all the different outcomes that probably come from that, right? Whether it's, you know, connecting with someone who's going to help you fix your drain, or whether it's, I don't know, something, you know, more career focused or career related. But we don't do that anymore. Like, I mean, we do. Like, I shouldn't speak in absolutes. We absolutely do, but we sure don't do it as much as we used to. You know, we don't gather in that way like we used to, you know, collectively.
Which should be a cool project to do. And I mean, Samantha, your comment reminds me of the Dalai Lama's famous quote: "We live in an era that we can send people to the moon, but we have a hard time walking next door to talk to our neighbors." There's a whole string. He lays out how weird the world that we live in, how advanced the world that we live in. And yet it's interesting, on one of the frameworks for this week is really thinking about connection with other human beings. So there's some practical tips and tools. And I put a link for Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Art of Communicating, which is on YouTube. It's so funny. The person that posted it's like, this totally violates all copyright laws by putting this up here, but I think everyone needs to hear this, so I'm just putting it up there. And they still haven't taken it down. So it's like either the publisher agreed or didn't see it, and it's got quite a bit of views. And it's really easy listen. It's a wonderful point, but he makes these he makes the really clear statement that the purpose of our phone is to connect with other people with love. And that actually, if we're going to really connect with other people, we need to put our phones away. So it's like all we're using this for is to set up like meetings or otherwise connect with people. I still freaking love talking with people on the phone. That's why I love Clubhouse so much, is it actually feels like that with a stranger element thrown in.
Yeah.
But we actually, to make the connection, we have to put our phone away. I'm listening to my heart and I'm going to speak from my heart. I'm going to be vulnerable in front of you. And what do you got? You want to like still stay on this call? Huh? This is kind of like the play, right?
Right.
So I am so in, and I wonder about creating. That makes me want to. I know there's people doing that work in Northern Colorado, like the helping communities generate more real community opportunities.
Well,
I don't know if we
I
need to
just wrote
go.
this
Yeah,
as
go
a
ahead,
note
Jean.
really fast, just sorry, that like,
No, I'm
how
done.
do we slow our lives down
Oh
so
boy.
that we have time to actually do that, right? Part of the reason we don't connect is because we're like running from this thing, running to the next, gotta do this,
Yeah.
gotta, you know?
And the feeling like we don't have any time totally prevents us from really connecting. So that does kind of connect to how we relate to time.
I also think there's this, foggy nostalgia that we have about some of that too, because back when, everybody married somebody that lived, within 2 blocks of them. And that was your entire community. So there was closeness in that, but you also didn't have a choice into who you were exposed to. And your life worldview, everything was pretty much like the people around you. And I think what's beautiful about now is that you get to choose that, and you get to have all of these different inputs and learn more about yourself because of the differences in where people grew up, or, whether it's their culture or their family or whatever. But because of those ability to span distances, we can have that now. I wouldn't know any of you had not been for Clubhouse. So, and I've met so many other people through the pandemic that were, and even some local people through the pandemic, but because of groups that were not stationed here, they were online. And so I wouldn't have that richness in my life. So is it a matter of, okay, we have all these mechanisms by which we can initiate contact with people. Is it just a matter of how we intentionally use them?
Keep that question alive.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I was thinking the exact same thing, that before phones, when somebody said, we're going to meet at the movies 6 p.m. on this date, we showed up. There was never an excuse to not show. I wonder how many people were stood up before we had cell phones, compared to now when we can say, actually, I'm running late, or I can't make it anymore. Were we more committed to our connections before we had cell phones, before we could communicate with somebody all the time? And it made me think about, our phones should be just facilitators of arranging the next gathering. So if this week, if there are 3 people who we talk to, who we live in the same city with, how about if the only thing we said to them over the phone was, I'm going to meet you on Wednesday for a coffee, and you met them? How much different would our week be? Just 3 people to actually use a phone to arrange meeting in person.
Yeah, for the people you can, right? So there's still, like, I can't meet any of you in person. I would love to.
Yeah.
Maybe someday we'll do a retreat in Bali.
Train the trainer.
The
Roller
vision,
skating
train the
in
trainer,
Bali.
roller skating in Bali. And honestly, I mean, my long-term vision for the Wisdom Workshop is to create a community that can resource each, like, to have like the community that lasts, like just like an alumni group, except without maybe all the petitions for money. Just joking. That's a terrible joke.
I think what Samantha said that stood out to me the most is commitment. I mean, how much does our current society value commitment, and how afraid are we to make those solid commitments and make sure that we don't change our schedule because we do have that on the calendar. And is commitment a big obstacle to real connection right now?
So it's not the technology, it's the change in human behavior.
Technology has facilitated it though, because right now, how many times if something is not in our calendars, we forget about it.
Sure.
It's because we have so much shit going on all the time.
I would have written it down before though. Before we had I had to have it written down because it was not going to happen.
But it's
Also-
like, I need to check my calendar. How do we not know what we're doing the next week?
Oh dear God, if you saw my calendar, you'd know how it needs to not be working. So then I won't have all these other commitments. I do have a question though about Clubhouse. Like, I haven't tried it. Maybe I need to, but y'all need to, like, I don't understand, how is that so different from the other things that we're talking about where I don't want to say the connection is not real, but you're connected to people I would say I don't know yet. Maybe once I get in there, I'll understand it. Y'all help me understand why I need to do Clubhouse and how it's different from other social media things that we're saying, other media platforms that we're saying are so awful.
I want to take that because this is a really
Thank
cool one, but I also want to, I don't want to lose sight of the big question on how we do this in the next week. Because there's two things in this big thread that I don't want to lose. One, we're connecting with ourselves. And if our connection with ourselves is in jeopardy, it makes it very difficult to make any kind of authentic connections with other people. So that connection with ourselves, which I, in this week, talk about our purpose, our sense of why, and our inner sense of what really matters to us as being the foundational piece that we connect with people. So I believe in Jesus. You believe in Jesus? Congratulations, we have a community. Not because I like you, and not because you like me. This, by the way, was, I had a scholar or a teacher in religion that this was basically like what he said a Christian marriage should be. A good Christian marriage, you're not married to each other because people are terrible. You're married to Jesus together. Which is really, I still thinks it stands out to me as being funny, but honestly, remove that from this context. It's not actually you. Yes, I value you, but we both value the future of education. We both have an affinity. So in educational future of education, this is called affinity groups. When we look at online education, if we both have an affinity for World of Warcraft, all of a sudden our social, political barriers, whatever, kind of go away. And we can just talk about World of Warcraft because we freaking love that shit. And do you want to go on a raid on Tuesday night? Fuck yeah, let's hang. I'm not hanging with you per se. I am, but I'm also hanging with my love of World of Warcraft. So thinking, getting close, which I'm pairing with the connection to myself. Big questions for the week. Connection to myself, and then how that plays out connecting with other people and the practical tools we have to do that. Clubhouse. A couple things I think that are very different about Clubhouse. One, there's no timeline. So you can't get lost in a history of what people have done.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, it's not image based and it's not visual based. So I'm not going to be fixated, distracted, looking at how you look or appear. It's just not the way that it's built. The other, though, the biggest thing, that's just on the interface. So how it makes my brain think. Because you can go on Clubhouse and link to people's Instagram and then do all that. Right? So it's not like, it's still dangerous in that way. The power of the human voice is really where it is for me. I think you know and can know a lot about someone based on their voice. And
But that
how
exists on TikTok, Sean.
What's that?
That exists on TikTok. You
Correct.
listen to somebody's voice. Right. I will say this, and I like Clubhouse, but I don't think it's going to be the end all be all. Give it time. We'll fuck it up somehow.
It'll be like a MySpace. It's already, there's been fluctuations. Again, it's like who's on there and what kind of things are they doing. There's times that I get on Clubhouse and I want nothing to do with anything in the hallway and just feels like a monumental waste of time, especially when there's amazing interviews on the Tim Ferriss show that I can listen to. By the way, oh my God,
Yes, Diana Chapman.
Yes,
Very awesome.
holy shit. Fucking
that
amazing.
Was so good. And how
So
different
good.
it was from her co-author, right?
Ah,
Same book, but completely different approach.
so fucking good. Kyle, conscious leadership, 15 commitments of conscious leadership. Are you familiar with the conscious leadership framework? Check it out. 15 commitments of conscious leadership. It's really, really, really interesting. I totally thought of you in our conversations related to this. I think there's an interactivity aspect of it that's fascinating. And like with TikTok, it promotes scrolling. So I could like be on here and then I'm into the next thing. I could be on here, I can go to the next thing. Clubhouse, if I commit to have a conversation with a group of people at this time, I begin to know them, who they are, what they care about. I see the moves they might make. And in particular rooms, like Frances Fry that runs a leader guide, the way she runs that room and the moves she makes as a teacher and as a conversationalist, I'm like, holy shit.
She's good.
She's good. And so for me, Leslie, long answer short, I think Clubhouse is the most like a classroom. It's like, it's set up like a classroom, or it can be. Some people I'm trying to use it that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's something about the quality of the audio as well, that and they set it up that way, as far as I know, that the quality audio, and they're trying to keep improving it, having and I don't know music and audio quality, but whatever they're doing helps you get closer and closer to actually hearing somebody like you would hear them if you were with them. And those a little bit more of the clarity and definition connects you more than say like this, right? If this were just purely audio, it wouldn't connect you as much as better quality audio.
It's that spatial audio that they use as well.
Yeah.
And if you listen with your earphones and people on the stage talking, you'll find that the person's on the left, you can hear them on your left side. The person on the right, you can hear on the right. So it's almost like you're in that moment with them. And the Clubhouse, the social aspect of Clubhouse, there's the teaching, learning, and the social side where there is, during the pandemic, okay, it is still a pandemic. Like when I first joined in February, there was this hope that these people existed and maybe you'll meet them. And now I've actually met people in person from Clubhouse, and they're just exactly as I expected. It's the same relationship. And I think Clubhouse gets you closer to people in the sense of there might actually be a possibility I could meet this person in real life, compared to, I think, TikTok, which is very much content, hoping for likes. I will never meet you ever.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference, is that hope that I could potentially meet a lot of these people who I connected with on this audio app.
And my impression of them is actually very accurate to who they really are, because I've heard them talk enough, and you just can't fake that shit over a long period of time.
Not over a long time, no. Yeah, and it's deep. There are a lot of deep conversations. There's a lot of bullshit on there too, but there are a lot of deep conversations. I think in the beginning, because of how it started and who they started with, there's just a larger percentage of people who are actually on there trying to have real conversations, trying to figure out this life thing and how to be better humans. And like even just some of the career rooms, like there's this one like that is product management, and they have rooms like twice a day or whatever, and they're just helping everybody who wants to be in that field, and they're helping each other, and like there's a camaraderie, I think, in there, if you avoid the garbage.
Is that word democratized social circles and also learning? They've made it accessible to everybody. How I would never have been in the same room as a Harvard professor who's released a book about leadership.
Right.
I could never imagine that. They've made what was held by the elite or the rich or the powerful available to someone like me. And I think that's such a powerful tool in that sense.
It's kind of like an interactive TED. Like one of the things TED, when it first came out and I first got involved, TED Talks a million years ago, I'm like, oh my God, I can do all this. And then when I realized the elitism of TED and how much it costs to go to a freaking TED event, I kind of started to hate it, because only some people got to be in that room and be part of it. But it sounds like in Clubhouse, you get to be in that circle with those people who are on the TED stage instead of just watching and listening. Is that?
Yep. And I've also heard academics say, oh my gosh, this is better. This room is better than every conference I've been to in the last 2 years. I didn't even have to pay for airfare.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just so
So
burned out from the pandemic of like not being with people. It's super hard to imagine engaging in that and loving it. And I've written it down. I have to try it tomorrow before I write. So I've got to at least find out what it is. It's a commitment to do that.
I feel like
also,
Give her a good, send her a good room, Sean, to do her
beware.
personal
I mean, beware.
Yeah.
It might be a giant waste of time, honestly. Like, just it's terrible. Also,
Okay.
consider it an interactive podcast. It's like a podcast that you can be involved in.
Yeah.
The first 2 weeks, I think, you'll be lost. Because I was on it for 2 weeks. I came off it. I was like, what's the point? Until you start following certain people and it takes a while to seep through like the mess.
just follow me. I'll lead you through the mess.
Yes.
See, you can, because the rooms that I host are generally pretty good. And then the rooms I go in are generally pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. We're in a lot of the same rooms. They're all.
He also has somebody in his room who has a super fabulous voice that I could listen to for hours.
Luca.
Oh,
My
Luca.
God. Scottish Irish dude
When
that
he reads his poetry, oh my God.
Yeah.
So amazing. Okay, let's rein it in. Thanks for the question about Clubhouse. Clearly we have some Clubhouse enthusiasts in the room, and
another avenue for connection, right?
it is.
We were
No, it
missing
really
something,
is.
And then we're like, hey, let's try this tool out. Does this tool add?
Correct.
And like for Kyle's point, like if it doesn't, okay, let me put it over here, and then I think if you can figure out what you want to achieve, what thing do you want out of it? What's the result you want? Then you can evaluate each thing based on that, and then toss whatever doesn't give you that.
And just to tie this all together, this is meant to build on the whole idea of designing and prototyping. So just as a personal example, when I was thinking about my future career, one of the things that came up this week was being a part-time YouTube philosopher. And what would it be to actually invest on creating content in there to make those connections? So now I have this project that I'm going to do to engage with people that are going to give me more feedback on where I am and what I care about. And am I doing that for likes? Am I doing that to monetize it? Or am I doing that to express my genuine curiosity and lifelong learning? And which one of those is going to have a better reaction? How am I going to find my people? So this week is kind of messy in terms of the prompts are kind of all over the place, because I think the theme of connection is kind of all over the place, but we're really trying to get connected with, again, who we are and what we care about. For me, lifelong learning, curiosity, wonder. Then how can I embody that in the world in a way that's going to help me find the people that I care about, or that could care about me? Not in like there's so many interesting things. We could go on for days on this topic. Thinking about Candace's last share about commitment, and there's a lot to say about all of that.
Well, I love the idea of just like I said kind of earlier on, not only finding yourself, but being found, like letting yourself be on the stage so that you can be found. Like, who's looking for me? There maybe is someone who's like, you complete the puzzle of this thing I'm trying to accomplish. And if you don't let yourself be found, then how can you feel connected? And that's interesting to me.
As a catalyst too. And I think like there's interesting like move, like a faith or trust-based move of being like, okay, sing, like what am I? How is this going to play out? And also with the patience thing, like when is it going to play out? Might not play out this week. Am I cool with that? Am I still going to show up and be like, get on the stage? Again, I think the authenticity is huge. And I do also love that as well, Candace. Just a preview of where we're going. Actually, no, let's not do that. Let's be present. This is a great group. Thanks, Jeannie. And thanks, Suzanne and Samantha. Thank you, Clubhouse. I am really interested in how this plays out individually. And one of the tensions in this course that I'm really curious about is how much you know, I want how much this is the work we're doing on our own and how much is the work we're doing together. And obviously this meeting for an hour and a half, it feels really nourishing because we're on it together. And I love the way this is playing out, but I am all ears are open to other kinds of experiments around, you know, what does it look like to do these other things together, quote unquote. How do we do that? Well,
You want to know now?
Yeah, right. I know. I have the big question. It's just for real. Yeah, we'll see where this goes. We have some time, and I'll send the email here with the prompts. They're already in the Google Drive folder, but it basically is what we went over today. And I think it's worth continuing to ask, how do I make those nourishing connections or be nourishing to other people? Who might I nourish today? Who can I call on the phone publicly on Clubhouse? No. Okay.
Ghostbusters.
Yes. Who are you gonna call? Who are you gonna call? Yes, I do. I mean, you know, and there's a good place to end it. You know, happiness is love, full stop. That giant study of human. So, which is a way of saying connection and attention. All right, well, y'all are awesome. I feel like I could go on for days, but I need to move.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
really.
you.
Bye-bye.
Yes, amazing group.
Have a less connected technology-wise week ahead. And 3
Ooh,
people to meet in person.
that's right.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna get on Facebook, on my Facebook group that I created of all the people I met from over the pandemic, and ask them to meet up. Yes.
Excellent. To connect with others, we must disconnect from the tech. On that note, I think I'm going to take a walk in the chilliness.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.